welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We are so incredibly glad you decided to join us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here.
So to get us completely oriented before we really jump in, today is Saturday, March 7th, 2026.
Right.
And for anyone following along with the liturgical calendar, it is the Saturday of the second week of Lent. Oh, and there's also an optional commemoration today of Saints Perpetua and Felicity.
Two truly remarkable figures from the early church.
Exactly. But our core mission today, the specific source material we are going to be exploring, is from the Gospel of Luke. We are looking at chapter 15, specifically verses 1 through 3, and then we'll pick up again at verses 11 through 32.
And what an incredible piece of ancient literature this is. I mean, we were dealing with what is arguably one of the most famous, most repeated stories ever told in human history.
The parable of the Prodigal Son.
The parable of the Prodigal Son. But here's the challenge we face today with this text. Because this story is so universally known, it's just incredibly easy for us to gloss over the raw, scandalous emotion of it.
Yeah, you just kind of nod along because you've heard it 100 times.
Precisely. When you know the ending, you tend to speed read past the genuinely radical nature of the father's response, and you almost certainly overlook the deeply revealing reactions of the two brothers.
And that is exactly why we wanted to do this deep dive with you today. We want to bypass that familiarity. I mean, we all know the basic plot, right? Guy takes his inheritance, ruins his life, comes home, gets a party.
Right.
But we want to look past that outline and really dig into the first century cultural shockwaves hidden inside this story.
Yes, and to feel those shockwaves, we have to start by looking at exactly who is standing in the crowd listening to this story being told. If you don't know who the original audience was, you just missed the absolute sharpest edge of the entire narrative.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the opening verses of our source material set up a scene of intense, almost uncomfortable social friction.
Very uncomfortable.
Lewin points out that tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear Jesus. These are the outcasts, the people deemed socially and religiously toxic.
The ones you avoid.
Right. But then, standing on the periphery, we have another group entirely. The Pharisees and the scribes are actively grumbling, complaining that, and I quote, "This man receives sinners and eats with them."
Yeah.
So you have this stark visual divide right there in the dust. The messy, broken people are pushing in close, while the religious elite, the strict rule followers, are standing back with their arms crossed, just deeply offended.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that grumbling is the entire catalyst for the story we're about to explore.
It's not just a random teaching moment.
No,
Right.
not at all.
Yeah.
This parable doesn't just drop out of the sky. It is a highly targeted, real-time response to a specific complaint. To the religious elite of the ancient Near East, sharing a meal wasn't just grabbing a quick bite.
It meant a lot more.
Oh, absolutely. Table fellowship was a profound statement of covenant, of intimacy, and of shared identity. To eat with someone was to say, I accept you, and we are one. So for Jesus to offer that to the socially unacceptable was a massive scandal.
Which brings us to the actual story he tells them. He basically says, let me tell you a story about a man who had two sons. And as we go through this, we really want you to keep that divided crowd in mind.
Yes.
Because it's no coincidence that the two brothers in the parable mapped perfectly onto those two exact factions standing right there listening.
It's a perfect mirror.
So let's look at the younger brother's departure. This younger son clearly represents the sinners and tax collectors drawing near. He walks right up to his father with the demand that, well, to modern ears, it just sounds like a greedy kid asking for his trust fund early.
Right.
He says, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." But in a first-century Middle Eastern context, how bad is this request, really?
Oh, it is breathtakingly callous. It is an absolute severing of the relational bond.
Wow.
In that culture, asking for your inheritance while your patriarch is still alive and well is the functional equivalent of looking him in the eye and saying, I wish you were dead.
That is heavy.
It's essentially saying, you are in my way. I value your wealth far more than I value my relationship with you.
So it's like demanding your parents liquidate their retirement accounts and sell the family home while they're still working, just so you can take the cash to Vegas.
That is a perfect modern analogy. Because wealth in that agrarian society wasn't just a pile of gold coins sitting in a chest somewhere.
Right, it was tied up in the estate.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
was land, it was the family estate that had been passed down for generations. For the father to grant this request, he would have had to publicly liquidate a third of his estate.
Which would have been humiliating.
A massive public humiliation for the entire family. And yet the father's response is immediate. He doesn't argue, he doesn't banish the boy. He simply divides his property. He grants the freedom the son is demanding, even though it destroys his own standing and just breaks his heart.
And the younger son wastes absolutely no time. A few days later, he gathers everything, converts it to cash, and journeys into a far country.
He wants distance.
Maximum distance. He wants to be entirely free of the father's house, the father's rules, the father's watchful eye. And once he gets there, the tragedy accelerates. He squanders the entire inheritance, the life's work of his father, the land of his ancestors, in reckless living.
Which brings us to the inevitable crash. The illusion of the far country always breaks down.
It always does.
The money runs out right as a severe famine hits the region. Suddenly, this younger son, who had been buying friends and living like a king, is completely destitute.
And this is where the cultural context hits so incredibly hard. To survive, he hires himself out to a citizen of that country who sends him into the fields to feed pigs.
Yeah.
Now, we know feeding pigs is a dirty job. But for a Jewish boy listening to this story in the first century, this detail would have landed with the force of a physical blow, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Pigs were ritually unclean. They were the ultimate symbol of defilement. For a Jewish man to be reduced to feeding pigs means he has lost absolutely everything.
Wealth, community, everything.
All of it. He's lost his religious identity and his basic human dignity. He is as far from home as a person can possibly get, both geographically and spiritually.
He is literally looking at the caropods the pigs are eating and wishing he could fill his stomach with them. He is starving.
Yeah.
But there is a phrase right here that is utterly devastating in its simplicity.
Yeah.
After all the partying, all the friends he bought, it simply notes, and no one gave him anything. He is completely abandoned.
Entirely alone.
But right there, in the mud, we get a pivot. He hits rock bottom, and the narrative shifts. It says, but when he came to himself. Now, my instinct, and I think the instinct of a lot of people hearing this, is to view this as a beautiful moment of deep spiritual repentance.
Sure, that he's overwhelmed with sorrow.
Right. Like he realizes he broke his father's heart and is just weeping for his sin.
What's fascinating here is that if you look closely at his actual logic, that is not what is happening at all.
Really?
Look at his thought process. When he comes to his senses, his reasoning is entirely practical.
Practical how?
Well, he thinks, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? This isn't a profound spiritual awakening. It's a calculated survival mechanism.
Oh, wow.
He does the math and realizes that the lowest-ranking day laborer on his father's estate gets 3 square meals a day while he is starving to death in a pig pen.
That completely changes the vibe of his return. He formulates a plan, he decides to go back, and he drafts an apology speech to pitch to his dad.
Exactly.
He plans to say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.
That rehearsed speech is so telling. It shows he understands the gravity of his actions. He forfeited his right to be a son, but his solution is entirely transactional.
He's trying to negotiate.
Yes. He thinks he can negotiate a contract. He hopes to be taken on as a wage laborer to at least survive and maybe, over a lifetime, slowly pay off the massive debt he incurred.
That makes sense.
He expects his father to behave the way a normal, rational person in that culture would behave. He expects justice. He expects to be treated exactly the way the Pharisees and scribes standing in the crowd would treat him.
I can just picture him practicing that speech on the long walk home. Trudging through the dust, rehearsing his lines over and over, steeling himself for the anger, the rejection, and the cold negotiation he is absolutely certain is coming.
But he drastically underestimates the nature of the father.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the reality of the father shatters every single cultural expectation. The son is walking home, but before he even gets to the edge of the property, the father sees him while he was still a long way off.
Think about the implication there. The father had to have been watching the horizon every day, waiting for a silhouette that walked like his boy.
And then the father does something unthinkable.
Yeah.
He feels compassion and he runs. In the context of the ancient Middle East, an esteemed elder patriarch simply did not run. To do so, he would have had to gather up his long robes, baring his legs, which was considered deeply undignified and shameful.
Very shameful. A man of his stature was supposed to walk slowly and deliberately, letting others come to him.
So why does he do it? Why abandon all dignity?
Because of something called the kazaza ceremony.
Kazaza Sarah.
Yes. In that time, if a Jewish son lost his inheritance among Gentiles and dared to return to his village, the community would perform a shame ceremony. They would break a large clay pot in front of him and declare him cut off from his people.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
The father knows this. He knows what the village will do to his son, so the father runs. He hikes up his robes, takes the shame upon himself, and races through the village to reach his boy first.
To protect him.
Exactly. Throwing his arms around him and kissing him before anyone can say a word, he physically shields his son from the judgment of the community.
That is incredible. The father literally absorbs the shame to protect the rebel. And right in the middle of that embrace, the son tries to stick to his script.
He does.
He starts delivering his rehearsed apology. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. He gets that much out. But then the father interrupts him.
Yes, the father completely ignores the transactional part of the speech. The son never even gets the chance to say, treat me as one of your hired servants.
He just cuts him off.
The father will not entertain the idea of a contract. He will not negotiate a lesser relationship.
Instead, he starts shouting orders to the servants, initiating a total, immediate restoration. He says, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet.
Yeah.
This isn't just about getting the kid out of his filthy clothes. Every item is loaded with meaning, right?
Completely loaded. The best robe would have been the father's own garment. Putting it on the son is a public declaration of the father's honor, covering the son's shame.
And the ring.
The ring is a signet ring. It's essentially giving him the family credit card and the authority to conduct business in the family name again. And the shoes are vital.
Why the shoes?
In that culture, slaves and servants went barefoot. Only free men and sons wore shoes in the house. By putting shoes on his feet, the father is actively dismantling the son's plan to be a servant. He's declaring to everyone watching, this is not my employee, this is my son.
And to top it all off, the father orders them to kill the fattened calf. Now, meat was a rarity, and a fattened calf was reserved for the most massive, joyous community festival.
A huge event.
The father is throwing a town-wide party, and he gives this profound, unassailable justification for the feast. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. The rebellion is over. The grace is total. And the celebration begins.
It is a beautiful, deeply moving scene of unmerited grace. The younger son, the stand-in for the tax collectors and outcasts, is fully received and eating at the father's table.
It really is beautiful.
If the story ended there, it would be a masterpiece. But Jesus isn't finished.
No, he's not.
Because he is still looking at that divided crowd. He has addressed the outcasts. Now he turns his narrative crosshairs directly onto the Pharisees and scribes who are grumbling about this exact kind of celebration.
Which brings us to the climax of the story of the older brother. We shift focus completely away from the party. The older son is out in the field. He's been out working, sweating, doing the right thing, fulfilling his duties just like a good son should.
Doing everything right.
And as he finishes his day and draws near to the house, he hears music and dancing. He calls over a servant and asks what is going on.
And the servant delivers the news. Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound.
The older brother's reaction is visceral. He is furious, and he flat out refuses to go inside.
Yeah.
Now, again, to our modern ears, this just sounds like sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
Someone is pouting because they didn't get a party. But in that culture, an eldest son refusing to join a feast hosted by his father. Well, that's a massive deal, isn't it?
It is a profound public insult. The father has invited the entire community to celebrate. As the eldest son, his duty was to serve as the co-host, circulating among the guests and honoring his father.
Right.
By staging a protest outside, refusing to enter, he is publicly shaming his father in front of the entire village. It is an act of rebellion just as severe, in its own way, as what the younger son did.
But notice what the father does in response. The father doesn't send a servant to drag him in. He doesn't yell from the doorway.
No, he doesn't.
Just as he ran down the road to meet the younger son, the father leaves the joy of the party, endures the public humiliation again, and goes out to entreat the older, angry son.
This raises an important question about the father's heart. His mercy moves in both directions. He crosses the distance to reach the rebellious rule breaker, and he crosses the distance to reach the resentful rule follower.
But the older brother is just seething. When the father comes out, the son unleashes this bitter litany of grievances, and his language is incredibly revealing.
It really is.
He says, look, These many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends.
Listen to the verbs he uses. I have served you, I never disobeyed. He sounds exactly like an employee negotiating for a year-end bonus.
He does.
He sounds just like the Pharisees. He views his relationship with his father entirely through the lens of servitude, strict obedience, and earned merit. He doesn't see himself as a son who owns the estate. He sees himself as a slave working for a wage.
And because he operates on a strict ledger of merits and demerits, the grace shown to his younger brother is deeply offensive to him.
Exactly.
He is completely blinded by his own perceived righteousness. He continues his rant, saying, "But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him."
Yeah.
There are two wild things happening in that sentence. First, he refuses to even call him my brother. He distances himself entirely, spitting out the words, "this son of yours."
And the second wild thing is the accusation itself. He accuses the younger brother of devouring the property with prostitutes.
Right. If you look back at the beginning of the story, the narrator only ever said the younger son squandered his property in reckless living.
Yes.
It is the older brother who fills in the blanks with the most scandalous, lurid assumption possible. His heart is so hardened by his own strict rule-following that he has nothing but contempt and condemnation for the one who failed.
It's a perfect mirror of the Pharisees looking down on the tax collectors. And how does the father respond to this venomous, deeply disrespectful outburst?
He doesn't get angry.
He doesn't pull rank, he doesn't strike him, he responds with incredible gentleness. He says, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours."
It's almost heartbreaking. The older brother is complaining about never getting a young goat for a party, and the father is gently reminding him, "You literally own the entire farm. Everything I have left is your inheritance. You have always had my presence, and you have always had my provision. You just never realized it because you were too busy acting like a hired hand instead of living like an heir."
And the father finishes by defending the joy of the feast. He tells the older brother, "It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found."
Wow.
Notice how the father gently, beautifully corrects the older son's language. The older son said, "This son of yours," and the father replies, "This your brother." He is pleading with the older son to recognize the familial bond, to let go of the rigid accounting of wrongs, and to join in the joy of resurrection and restoration.
So what does this all mean? We have spent this time walking through these incredibly dense, culturally shocking verses.
Yeah.
But the real power of this source material isn't just in understanding the first century context. It's in considering how this dynamic plays out today.
If we synthesize everything we have looked at, the ultimate piercing insight of this text is that it isn't just a story about one lost son. It is a story about two lost sons.
Two lost sons.
One was lost in a far country, squandering his life in reckless rebellion and wild living. But the other was lost right there in his father's house. He was lost in the field of his own self-righteousness, bitter, resentful, and completely alienated from the true heart of his father.
Yeah.
Both were separated from the father's joy, yet the father's mercy extended to both of them. He ran down the dusty road to embrace the broken rebel, and he came out of the warmth of the house to plead with the angry rule follower. He met each of them exactly where they were, inviting them both to the table.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to ponder as you go about the rest of your day. When you look at these two brothers and the two factions they represent, which brother do you identify with most today?
That's the real question.
Are you the younger brother, feeling the heavy weight of your mistakes, making that long, dusty walk home from a far country, wondering if you will be received? Or are you the older brother, standing outside the house, doing everything right, following all the rules, but struggling with a hardened heart, unable to celebrate the grace that is freely given to someone else?
It's a question that requires deep honesty. But the immense comfort found in this text is that no matter where you find yourself, sitting in the mud on the road home, or standing resentfully outside the door, the Father is actively coming out to meet you.
Absolutely. And as we close our deep dive today to tie everything together, we want to end with a short, reverent, concluding prayer directly tied to the themes we've explored in this gospel passage. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your boundless, scandalous compassion. Give us the courage to return to you when we wander into the far country, the grace to accept your unmerited forgiveness, and a heart open enough to rejoice when others find your mercy, rather than standing outside in bitterness. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today. We hope this closer look has brought fresh light and a new perspective to a deeply familiar story. We warmly invite you to return tomorrow for another deep dive as we continue to unpack the richness of these incredible sources. Until then, take care.